Hello. Hello. Hi. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. So, welcome to Rapid Revision Program NEET 2025 Geology class. So, in the previous class, we had discussed about the animal kingdom. Invertebrates and vertebrates we completed, and human reproduction chapter we completed, and human reproductive health chapter also we completed. So now in this class, I will be discussing about the breathing and exchange of the gases. This is the one of the very important chapter in human physiology. In human physiology chapter, so this is the first chapter in human physiology. So now we will be discussing about breathing and exchange of the gases in today's classes, right? So from this human physiology chapter, that is first chapter is breathing and exchange of gases. From this chapter you will get 3 question or 2 question, minimum 2 question and maximum 3 or 4 question you will get from this chapter. Okay, so this is very important chapter, right? Right. So so we are discussing only NCRT line to line in this class. So we having NEET exam on May 4th. So this is a rapid revision. We covering only NCRT points. Maximum NCRT points we are covering. We are not taking any other points, that extra points. Only NCRT line to line we will be discussing in this class. Right? Doubt. So in introduction part NCRT book they have given that oxygen is utilized by the oxygen is utilized by the organism indirectly to break down the simple molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acid. Okay, so we are using oxygen indirectly to break. So now you can see this is the cell, right? So after digestion, after final digestion of the food material, we will get glucose from the carbohydrate and amino acid from the proteins and fatty acid from the lipids. These are the final digestion materials of the final digestion. So now these finally digested material through the circulation or via circulation, they reach into the cell. Example, C6H12O6 is a glucose. So along with the circulation, the cell also receiving oxygen, right? This is the cell. Okay, so oxygen is also reaching to the cell and glucose is also reaching to the cells, where indirectly oxygen is helping indirectly organism to break the simple molecules like glucose, amino acid and fatty acid. Very important. So based on this sentence, they may ask you question that animals or organisms are using oxygen indirectly to break down the simple molecule is the right answer, but sometimes they will give you complex molecules like protein or lipids, carbohydrate. They will ask you question. In that case, that statement will be the wrong answer. So here we are using oxygen indirectly to break down the simple molecules like glucose, amino acid and fatty acid, right? So when glucose combining with oxygen in the presence of water, it will produce carbon dioxide, H2O and ATP, and also releases small amount of temperature. Okay, so now because of this metabolism, generally we can say it is a metabolism and one type of catabolism. Catabolism where destruction of the components, you can see complex molecules of the glucose destructed into simple molecules, carbon dioxide and water, breakdown of the complex molecule. So these type of chemical reaction or these type of metabolic reaction, we can say it is a catabolism. Because of this catabolic reaction, right, that is utilization of oxygen, we are getting ATP energy. We are getting ATP energy. So why organism indirectly using the oxygen to break these simple compounds to derive energy? To derive energy, animals are using or organisms are using oxygen. So what is the use of this energy? So that energy is used for various functions or various activities. The energy which is produced by breakdown of these simple molecules, we are getting some energy. That energy will be utilized by the organism for various functions. Okay, so that is very, very important. So that's why continuous supply of oxygen for various functioning of our body parts, various activities of our body, we continuously required oxygen. That oxygen is continuously provided to the cells, right? And the carbon dioxide which is produced inside the cell, that should be eliminated from the cell or that should be released outside. Okay, so the carbon dioxide which is produced inside the cell, that should be removed outside, and the oxygen continuously we have to supply for the production of energy. Okay, so now the entry of air entry of oxygen from atmosphere into lungs and the release of carbon dioxide from alveoli or lungs into atmosphere, generally we can say it is a breathing, right? So how we are getting, how our cells are getting oxygen and how the carbon dioxide is eliminated from the body, that is by a mechanism. That mechanism generally we can say breathing mechanism. Breathing. Okay, so what is breathing? Breathing is a mechanism or breathing is a process where atmospheric air enter into alveoli and alveolar air is moving outside from the lungs, it is moving outside. So that mechanism we are calling breathing. So this is the mechanism which is bringing oxygen or continuously supplying oxygen to the cells, and also carbon dioxide which is produced in the cells also eliminated from the cell by the mechanism known as breathing. So this breathing mechanism commonly known as respiration. So generally the breathing is commonly we can say it is a respiration. Okay, so I hope you understood. Here there is a chance question. So oxygen is utilized by the organism indirectly to break the simple molecules, you remember, right? So why animals are need oxygen, or why animals need breathing? Why organisms are they need breathing? Breathing is the mechanism continuously supplying oxygen to the cell and also eliminating carbon dioxide from the cell. For that purpose we need a breathing. So breathing is commonly known as respiration. Okay, so assertion reason type question also they can frame from this paragraph of NCERT, first introduction paragraph. And you don't forget that Alfonso Corti, one scientist is scientist name also, scientist also it is in there, the scientist name Alfonso Corti. Earlier he was working on cardiovascular system of the reptilia, but later he shifted his research on to the inner ear cortex organ of cortex. Okay, so that scientist name also you remember, and his discovery also you can remember, right? So now what is respiratory organ? The organs which helps in breathing mechanism are the organs which are helping in elimination of carbon dioxide from the body and entry of oxygen into the lungs. So there are specific organs are present. Those are the organs which helps in elimination of oxygen, entry of oxygen and elimination of carbon dioxide. So the organs which are involved in breathing mechanism we are calling respiratory organs. The organs those are involved in respiration, that is breathing mechanism, we are calling respiratory organs, right? So the organs which involved in breathing mechanism we are calling respiratory organs. Now the mechanism of the breathing. What is mechanism? How air enter into, how carbon dioxide air from the alveoli is coming out. That is the mechanism of breathing. So that breathing mechanism vary among different groups of animals. Okay. So the mechanism of the breathing is not same in all the animals. It is varying. It is different from animals to animals. Right. So in all animals, the respiration or breathing mechanism is not same. It is different according to the animals. Right. So now the breathing mechanism depends on habitat of the animals and level of organization. Very, very important point. The breathing mechanism of an animal depends on in which type of habitat they are living, whether it is aquatic habitat, terrestrial habitat, right? So it depends upon habitat of the animals or living organism and level of organization, right? That means how the animal body is made up of with, whether it is made up of with only single cell or only group of cells are there or group of tissue or organ system, right? So the mechanism of the breathing depends upon habitat of the organism and level of organization. Very, very important. Okay. Next one. Example, lower invertebrates. Lower invertebrates, these are the invertebrates though not well developed, right? Lower invertebrate compared to others. Example, sponges, also called porifera, common name of the porifera. Coelenterates, also called cnidarians, already we had discussed about this. Flatworms, right, etc. In these animals, right, there are no respiratory organs. There are no respiratory organs in this animal. There are no respiratory organs are present, but the entire body surface helps in exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay. In this animal, there are no specific respiratory organ for exchange of the gases oxygen and carbon dioxide between atmosphere and alveoli. So the entire exchange of oxygen, both the gases, takes place through the entire body surface. Very, very important, right? So in this animal, there are no specific respiratory organs, only body surface which helps in exchange of the gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. Very important. In other animals, you can see earthworm. Earthworm, you know, right? Moist cuticle present. Very, very important. Not the moist skin, moist cuticle present in case of the earthworm, that helps in. So this is the moist cuticle present here that helps in exchange of the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Here also there are no specific respiratory organs are present here. In earthworm also no specific respiratory organ, very, very important. Only moist skin present. Next, insects. Insect, a network of tubules present. That network of tubules we are calling tracheal tubules. So there is a network of tubules which present in insect which helps in exchange of the gases, atmospheric air into the body and carbon dioxide from the body to outside. So you might have studied in cockroach. Mostly cockroach we already studied at that tracheal system which helps in respiration. Next, most of the aquatic arthropods, very, very important. Most of the aquatic arthropod and molluscus or mollusca, Specialized vascular bag-like structures are present. We are calling them gills. The specialized vascular bag-like structure which helps in respiration in aquatic arthropods and mollusca. We are calling gills. Very, very important. Okay. Next, terrestrial forms. Terrestrial forms means they present on land. That's why I told you mechanism of breathing depends on habitat of the animal and level of organization. So the terrestrial habitat, right? Aquatic habitat, important. Vascularized bag-like structures. Vascular bag-like structures are present in terrestrial form. That vascular bag-like structures we are calling lungs. In terrestrial animals, vascular bag-like structure which helps in exchange of the gases we are calling lungs. But here specialized vascular structures we are calling gills in case of aquatic animals. Very, very important. So this is important. Among the vertebrates, the fish uses gills for respiration or breathing. So the respiration with the help of the gills we are calling bronchial respiration. Bronchial respiration. Bronchial respiration means simple, the exchange of the gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide, with the help of the gills. So we are calling bronchial respiration. Among the vertebrates, the respiration through the gills takes place only in fish. Some exceptions are there, I will tell you that. In case of amphibia, this is very, very important, amphibia. In case of amphibia, three types of respirations are there. One, respiration by the gills, respiration by the skin, respiration by the lungs, and one more also, respiration by the buccal cavity, BC. Okay. When frog in larval form, it can respire by using gills. When frog is in estivation and hibernation condition, they respire with the help of the skin. That's why the skin is always moist condition. But in case of earthworm, moist cuticle is helping in respiration. Here, moist skin helps in respiration. Lungs also help in respiration, and buccal cavity also help in respiration, you can remember. Okay, right? Remaining reptilia and aves and mammals, lungs are present, they helps in respiration. So the respiration with the help of the lungs we are calling pulmonary respiration. Pulmonary respiration. Pulmonary respiration. And the respiration with the help of the skin we are calling cutaneous respiration. Cutaneous respiration. Pulmonary respiration, cutaneous respiration. Okay, and bronchial respiration. So right, so bronchial respiration which takes place in fish and most of the aquatic arthropods and molluscas. Cutaneous respiration takes place in amphibia, mostly during hibernation and estivation, and earthworm. Okay, so very, very important. This is examples of organ, respiratory organs. Very, very important. Next one. Right. So this is very, very important. External nostrils. External nostrils. Okay. So one pair of external nostrils are present above the upper lip. One pair of external nostrils are present above the upper lip. You can see these are external nostrils, these are the lips, upper lip and lower lip, above the nostril. They open into nasal chamber. This is nasal chamber. Nasal chamber, right, through the nasal passages, right? So these two are nasal passages. Nasal passages. Okay. These nasal passages open into, you can see internal nostrils. Internal nostrils. Internal nostril open into a common passage for food and air, that is called pharynx. This is a common passage for food and air. Okay, this is food and air. Pharynx is a common passage for food and air. Okay, so nasal chamber through the nasal passage open into pharynx. Nasal chamber, that is nasal chamber through the nasal passage open into pharynx. Okay, now the pharynx open into, this is pharynx. Pharynx open into voice box or sound box. We are calling larynx. Voice box or sound box, that helps in production of the sound because of vocal cords are present, right? Vocal cords are present. So these larynx opening into pharynx by small opening we are calling glottis. Glottis is a small opening which present in larynx, right? So these glottis covered by a thin elastic structure. You can see it is covered by thin elastic cartilage. The thin elastic cartilage which is covering the glottis we are calling epiglottis. Epiglottis. Main function of the epiglottis, that prevent entry of the food. You can see this is the root of the food. Okay, and this is the root of the air, right? When you are eating, when you are drinking, the food is not going inside the trachea or inside the larynx because it is closing. When you are eating or when you are drinking, this opening is closed by the epiglottis, right, preventing entry of the food into respiratory system. That is epiglottis. You remember thin elastic cartilage also, you remember thin and elastic cartilage. Okay, larynx. So larynx open into trachea. This is trachea. Larynx open into trachea. Okay. Larynx open into trachea. Larynx open into trachea. Okay, this is trachea. Right. Trachea enter into thoracic cavity, mid thoracic cavity. This is thoracic cavity. Mid thoracic cavity dividing into primary branch, dividing into two bronchi at the junction of fifth thoracic vertebrae backside. So this is vertebral column, this is trachea. So at the junction of fifth thoracic vertebra, it dividing into fifth thoracic vertebra. At the junction of fifth thoracic vertebra, trachea dividing into bronchi. So bronchi dividing into primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, initial bronchioles, and finally terminal bronchioles. Terminal bronchioles. Okay. So primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, bronchioles. And bronchioles, final bronchiole is terminal bronchiole. Right. So the terminal bronchiole This is terminal bronchiole, respiratory bronchiole, and alveolar duct, and these are alveoli. Alveoli. Okay. Now, very important. From external nostril up to larynx. From external nostril to up to larynx, we can say it is a upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract. Okay. From trachea to alveoli. From trachea to alveoli, we are calling lower respiratory tract. Lower respiratory tract. Okay. So upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory. The lower respiratory tract from trachea to, from here, trachea to up to alveoli, we are calling lower respiratory tract, and from external nostril to up to larynx, we are calling upper respiratory tract. In health and diseases chapter, you might have studied about the common cold. Common cold can affect only on upper respiratory tract. It can infect only the upper respiratory tract but not the lower respiratory tract. So in that case, sometimes they will ask you, common cold is affecting which of the following part? So you remember up to upper respiratory tract, that is larynx. From trachea onwards up to alveoli, we are calling lower respiratory tract. Okay, lower respiratory tract. Right, next one. From external nostril to up to terminal bronchiole. From external nostril up to terminal bronchiole, we are calling conducting zone or conducting part. Conducting zone or conducting part. Okay. From external nostril up to terminal bronchiole, we are calling conducting part or conducting zone. That means it is the part of the respiratory system that transmit atmospheric air into alveoli. Right? Now, the terminal bronchiole, alveolar duct, and alveoli. So you can see the respiratory bronchiole. After terminal bronchiole, there is a respiratory bronchiole. The respiratory bronchiole, alveolar duct, and alveoli together forming exchange part. Exchange part of respiratory system or exchange zone. Actually, this is the actually site where exchange of the gases takes place. This is the actual site where exchange of the gases takes place. That is very important. Respiratory bronchioles, alveolar duct, and alveoli is the exchange part or exchange zone. Now you can see this is very important. Trachea, bronchi, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, initial bronchioles. Initial bronchioles. Right? These are all supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. You can see these C-shaped incomplete cartilaginous rings are supporting trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchioles and up to initial bronchioles. Up to initial bronchioles only C-shaped incomplete cartilaginous rings are present. Okay, incomplete cartilaginous rings are present. Very important. Now, so terminal bronchioles produce number of thin irregular vascularized structures. We are calling alveoli. So this is terminal bronchiole. Thus terminal bronchiole producing number of irregular thin walled structure. The number of thin, irregular and vascular. Vascular means more number of blood vessels are present. So we are calling them alveoli, right? So alveoli. So already I told you, from external nostrils up to terminal bronchiole we are calling conducting part or conducting zone. Main function of conducting zone, it can transmit atmospheric air to the alveoli. And also its main function, it clears any foreign particles that present in the inhaled air, it will be cleared by the conducting zone. And also it can humidifies inhaled temperature. It can makes the temperature according to the body temperature. Okay, it modifies the temperature which is inhaled according to the body temperature. So these are the main functions of the conducting zone, right? So respiratory zone main function, actual site of exchange of the gases. Okay, so respiratory bronchioles, alveolar duct and alveoli together forming exchange part, right? Exchange part. This is actually site of diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. In conducting zone, 30% of air will remain in conducting zone. The 30% of air will remains in conducting zone. Only 70% of air actually involved in exchange. Only 70% of air that we are inhaling, that is involved. Suppose you are inhaling 500 ml of air, right? In this 500 ml of air, 150 ml, that means 30% will present in conducting part. Only 70%, that is 350 ml, 70% of air that enter into alveoli, where it is exchanged, right? So this is very, very important. Alveolar ventilation, this is called pulmonary ventilation and alveolar ventilation. Okay, so that much depth question they don't ask, but important, remember. Next one, lungs. Okay, lungs are present in airtight chamber, thoracic cavity, airtight chamber, thoracic cavity. Lungs are present in thoracic cavity. It is a airtight chamber. Airtight chamber. Airtight chamber, thoracic cavity, right? And ventrally the lung supported by. Ventrally the lungs are supported by. So put the rough diagram. Right? So ventral side, lungs supported by sternum. Ventral side supported by sternum, breastbone. Sternum or breastbone. Ventral side, it is supported by sternum or breastbone. Ventral side, this is sternum. Right? Lower side, it is supported by dome-shaped diaphragm. Lower side supported by dome-shaped diaphragm. Dome-shaped diaphragm supporting lower side. Lateral side, it is supported by ribs. Okay, so laterally supported by ribs. Back side, dorsal side, this back side, it is supported by vertebral column. Back side, it is supported by vertebral column. Vertebral column, right? Anteriorly, here, this is anterior region, here anteriorly supported by neck. Okay, anteriorly supported by neck. Very, very simple. Lungs are present in airtight chamber, that is thoracic cavity, right? So ventrally supported by the sternum, laterally supported by the ribs, and backside it is supported by the vertebral column, laterally by the ribs, and lower side it is separated by the or protected by the dome shape diaphragm. Dome shape diaphragm. Okay. Now lungs are covered by double layered membrane pleura. Pleura is a double layered membrane. Right? So pleura is a double layered membrane that covering the lungs. So outer layer we are calling parietal layer. Inner is called visceral layer. Okay. So now these are the lungs. They are supported by double layered membrane. We are calling pleura. Outer is called parietal pleura. Inner is called visceral pleura. Parietal pleura closely contacting with thoracic chamber or thoracic cavity. Visceral pleura inner layer closely contacting with the lung surface. Inner layer is closely contacting with lung surface. Uppermost layer, outermost layer closely contacting with thoracic cavity. In between them, there is a cavity present that is called pericardial pleural fluid present. In this cavity, there is a cavity in between this. There is a liquid present. That liquid prevent friction on the surface of the lungs. It prevents friction on surface of the lungs. Okay. Right. Next. So the steps which are involved in respiration, right? Very, very important. The steps which are involved in respiration. Very, very important. These are the steps which are involved in respiration. One, breathing, pulmonary ventilation, right? And second, diffusion of gases, that is carbon dioxide and oxygen across alveolar membrane. Second step, transportation of gases by the blood. Diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and tissue. And cellular respiration, that means utilization of oxygen by the cells, is called cellular respiration. Here you should remember the exchange of the gases. You can see here alveoli. Across the alveoli, oxygen is moving inside, carbon dioxide from the body moving outside. So here this is called external respiration. External respiration. Very, very important. External respiration. Breathing mechanism, you know, that is pulmonary ventilation. Breathing is also called as pulmonary ventilation. Transportation of gas by the blood. Okay. Once the oxygen and carbon dioxide enter into the blood, they are transported by the blood out of the lungs and into the cells. Next one, diffusion of the, you can see this is the blood and these are the tissue. Exchange of oxygen and exchange of the carbon dioxide between the tissue and blood. We are calling this internal respiration. Internal respiration. Internal respiration. And you can see this is the cell. Oxygen is entered inside the cell and glucose also enter inside the cell. So utilization of oxygen with the help of the there is a chemical catabolic reaction, right? So cellular respiration, where is oxygen and glucose utilized and they produce energy. So that is utilization of oxygen is called cellular respiration. Okay, the sequence is very, very important. The sequence is also important. Sometimes instead of asking this, they will ask you external respiration. Also ask you internal respiration, right? So the exchange of the gases between blood and tissue is called internal respiration, and the oxygen when enter into the cell and combining with glucose and producing ATP energy by breakdown of the glucose is called cellular respiration. I hope you understood this concept. This is very, very important concept. And arrangement of the respiration, the steps which are involved in respiration, they will ask you question. Okay. Next, This is very, very important. Mechanism of breathing. How breathing mechanism takes place. Mechanism of breathing. Okay. So generally breathing mechanism involving two processes. One, inspiration, also called inhalation. Second one, expiration, also called exhalation. Inspiration is an active process that need energy. Expiration is a passive process. It does not require any ATP energy. So it is a passive and it is an active process. Okay. So generally for inspiration it will take 2 seconds. Expiration it will take 5 seconds. Sorry, 3 seconds. It will take 3 seconds. 2 seconds and 3 seconds. Right? So when inspiration takes place in the breathing mechanism. Very, very important, careful. Okay. When intrapulmonary pressure is less than atmospheric pressure. When intrapulmonary pressure means the pressure inside the lungs is less than atmospheric pressure. So then inspiration takes place. Then inspiration takes place. Okay. You can see these are the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity, and this is cavity that present in the lungs. So the cavity which present in the lungs, we are calling this is pulmonary cavity. Right? Pulmonary cavity, and this is thoracic cavity. Pulmonary cavity and thoracic cavity. Right? Now when intrapulmonary pressure, that means the pressure which present inside the pulmonary or lungs, the pressure within the lungs we are calling pulmonary pressure, right? When this pulmonary pressure is less than atmospheric pressure, when pulmonary pressure is less than atmospheric pressure, right? So then contraction of diaphragm, contraction of external intercostal muscle, right, occurs. Before that I will explain this, very, very important. Entry of air into the lungs and carbon dioxide out of the lungs is carried between the lungs and atmosphere by creating pressure gradient. Okay. So entry of the air, atmospheric air enter into the lungs, and carbon dioxide rich air from alveoli is moving out, right? This movement is carried by a pressure gradient that present between alveoli and lungs. Because of the certain pressure gradient between alveoli and atmosphere, there is an entry of air into the lungs, exit of air from the lungs. That pressure gradient between atmosphere and alveoli created by diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Intercostal muscles. Okay. So there is a pressure gradient present between atmosphere and alveoli. That pressure gradient is created by the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. So intercostal muscle, that muscle which present between the ribs. Okay. You can see. So these are the muscles. These are the ribs. And this is the diaphragm, dome shaped diaphragm, right? So the muscles which are attaching to the ribs, we are calling intercostal muscles, and the muscle which present in diaphragm, we are calling phrenic muscles. Phrenic muscles are muscles which present in diaphragm. Phrenic muscles are intercostal muscles. These are called intercostal muscles. There are 12 pairs. 12 pairs of intercostal muscle. 11 external intercostal muscles, 1 pair internal intercostal muscles. 1 pair is external intercostal muscle, 11 pairs are internal intercostal muscles. Because of these two muscles and phrenic muscles and costal muscles, there is a gradient between alveoli and atmosphere is maintained. Right? I hope you understood this concept. Okay? Right. So when intrapulmonary pressure is less than atmospheric pressure, then contraction of diaphragm. When diaphragm undergoing contraction, right? So the volume of thoracic cavity increasing anterior-posterior. Okay. So when diaphragm undergoing contraction, volume of thoracic cavity increasing anterior-posterior. At the same time, when intercostal muscles, external intercostal muscles are undergoing contraction, volume of thoracic cavity increasing dorso-ventrally. So dorso-ventrally, anterior-posteriorly. So when volume increasing, we can see the volume of thoracic cavity increasing. Now you can see the volume of thoracic cavity is increased. When volume of thoracic cavity is increased, so volume of pulmonary cavity also increases. Volume of pulmonary cavity also increases. When volume increasing, pressure decreases. Pulmonary volume increasing, but intrapulmonary pressure decreases. When intrapulmonary pressure is less compared to atmosphere, atmospheric air enter into the lungs. That is called inspiration. So that means there is a negative pressure present in the lungs. There is a negative pressure present in the lungs. Okay. So that is called inspiration. Okay. So because of contraction of diaphragm, so you can see this is the dome shaped diaphragm. When it is undergoing contraction, it is a flat. Dome shaped diaphragm became flat. The cavity increasing anterior posterior. When these intercostal muscles are contracting, it is moving like this, right? Anterior posterior, dorso-ventral. Volume of thoracic cavity increase and volume of the pulmonary cavity also increases. When cavity increasing, pressure decreases. So low pressure. So atmospheric pressure is more. So air from atmosphere enter into the lungs. That is called inspiration. Right? Next, expiration. Expiration is quite opposite. When intrapulmonary pressure is more than atmospheric pressure, so diaphragm undergoing relaxation, external intercostal muscles also undergoing relaxation. So volume of thoracic cavity decreasing anterior posteriorly and volume of the thoracic cavity decreasing dorso-ventrally. When volume decreased, when volume decreasing, pressure increases. Volume, thoracic volume decreasing, pulmonary volume also decreasing, but pressure inside the pulmonary cavity increasing. When intrapulmonary pressure is increases, air from the lungs, it is going outside. That is called expiration. Expiration, inspiration. Okay. So this is very, very important question. They will ask you from these area. Alright. Next, respiratory volumes and capacities or lung volumes and capacities, very, very important. So this is the most expected area. From here we can get question from this area. Most expected topic from this area we are expecting questions, right? So careful. Right. So respiratory volumes and capacities. Here you remember, beside these two phrenic muscles and intercostal muscles, there are certain muscles that present in abdomen. They also helps in inspiration, forced inspiration, forced expiration. Abdominal muscle helps in forced inspiration, forced expiration. That you remember. Next one. So respiratory volumes and capacities. The first respiratory value, tidal value, abbreviated as TB, tidal value. The volume of air inspired, expired during normal breathing is called tidal value, right? So during the normal breathing, the amount of air is going into the lungs and certain amount of air is coming out of the lungs is called tidal value. Okay, so the amount of air or the volume of air inspired, expired during normal breathing, we are calling tidal value. It is approximately 500 ml in healthy person. So the tidal value is 500 ml in healthy person, right? Suppose if healthy person breathing 12 to 16 times per minute, healthy person can breathe 12 to 16 times per minute. One breath contain one inhalation, one exhalation. So one breath is equal to one inhalation, one exhalation, right? So 12 to 16 time means 12 inhalation, 12 exhalation. 12 times we are breathing 12 times per minute. That means 12 inhalation, 12 exhalation, right? Right. If 500 ml into 12 to 16 times, what is the total amount of air that we are inhaling during 1 minute? That is 6000 ml to 8000 ml per minute. The total amount of air we are inhaling or exhaling during the normal breathing per minute is 6000 to 8000 ml. Okay, milliliters. Sometimes they will convert into liters and they will ask you 6 liters, 8 liters. I hope you understood this next one. Inspiratory reserve volume, inspiratory reserve volume, inspiratory reserve volume. The additional volume of air a person can breathe in after normal expiration. Sorry. Okay. So additional volume of air a person can breathe, a person can inspire by forcible inspiration after tidal value. Normally, suppose I am breathing 500 ml. After that also, forcibly I can take in. Okay, that is called additional volume of air a person can inspire by forcible inspiration. Right? This is called inspiratory reserve volume, that is 2500 to 3000 ml. Liters 2.5 liter to 3 liters. Next, expiratory reserve volume. Additional volume of air a person can exhale or a person can expire by forcible expiration. Normally we are exhaling 500 ml, but we can exhale by forcible also. That is called expiratory reserve volume, that is 1000 ml to 1100 ml, right? So next one, very very important, residual volume RV. The volume of air which remains in the lungs even after forcible expiration. Or simple, if you take out the lungs and if you dance also, some amount of air still remains in the lungs. So that amount of air we are calling residual volume. Residual volume. Okay. So these are the volumes. So by addition of those volume, we will get capacities of the lungs. Capacities of the lungs. Okay. Now you can see this is inspiration, expiration. The amount of air we are inhaling, exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling during the normal breathing. This is called tidal value. That is 500 ml. 500 ml. So the maximum amount of air a person can breathe in after or by forcible expiration. The maximum amount of air or the additional amount of air a person can breathe in by forcible inspiration. This is called inspiratory reserve volume 2500 to 3000. Okay. So normally we are exhaling 500 ml, but forcible we are exhaling, you can see this is this much amount of air we are exhaling. This much amount of air we can exhale by forcible expiration. That is 1000 ml to 1100 ml expiratory reserve value. Right? So after forcible expiration also some amount of air you can see still it is there. After forcible expiration you can see forcibly you are eliminating this much amount of air. Still some air that is left in the lungs, that is called residual volume, that is 1100 ml to 1200 ml. By addition of these you will get some capacities. Example, you can see inspiratory capacity. Inspiratory capacity, the maximum or the volume of air a person can breathe in after forcible inspiration, that includes tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. So inspiratory capacity is equal tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. The maximum volume a person can breathe in, right, by forcible inspiration after normal expiration is called inspiratory capacity. Next, expiratory capacity, the volume of air a person can breathe out completely by forcibly. Simple. That also tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume. Expiratory reserve volume. These two together we are calling expiratory capacity. Okay. Functional residual capacity, FRC, the amount of air that is left in the lungs. You can see this is the amount of air that is left in the lungs after normal expiration. Normally you are exhaling 500 ml of air. After that, expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume both are present. So these two together we are calling functional residual capacity. Okay, and the maximum amount of air a person can breathe in after forcible expiration, or the maximum volume of air a person can breathe out, right, after forced inspiration, that is called vital capacity, that is tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume plus expiratory reserve volume. So addition of all this you will get vital capacity, right? So the maximum amount of air that is accumulated in the lungs by forcible expiration we are calling total lung capacity. The maximum amount of air which is accumulating in the lungs after forcible inspiration, that is called total lung capacity. Okay, so by addition of that volumes you will get the volumes of the TV, volumes of inspiratory capacity, volume of the expiratory capacity, volume of functional residual capacity, right? That is very, very important. This is the spirometer we are using to record the gases which are involved in breathing, but the residual volume which is not recorded by this spirometer. Okay, that you remember. Next one, exchange of the gases. Actually, alveoli is the primary site of exchange of gases, and exchange of the gases also takes place between tissue and blood. Exchange of gas also takes place between tissue and blood, so that I told you internal respiration. Okay, so exchange of the gases depends on simple physical process that is called diffusion, simple diffusion. Physical simple process, that is simple diffusion, right? So it depends on pressure gradient. The simple physical process depending upon pressure gradient, right? And other factor that is affecting on diffusion of the gases are solubility of the gases, that means dissolving capacity of a gas in water, thickness of the respiratory or diffusion membrane, and partial pressure of gases. Partial pressure of gases means the amount of the gases or the pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture of gases. The pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture of gases, we can say it is a partial pressure. That is, atmospheric air pressure is 760, percentage of oxygen is 21, 100. So you will calculate, you will get partial pressure of oxygen 159 mmHg. Right, you can see these are the partial pressures in different sites in the body. You can see the atmospheric air. The partial pressure of atmospheric air, oxygen, is 159 mmHg. Alveoli, the partial pressure is 104 mmHg. 104 mmHg. Deoxygenated blood 40 mmHg. Oxygenated blood 95 mmHg. The tissue contain only 40 mmHg. Carbon dioxide, atmospheric air contain 0.3 mmHg. Alveoli contain 40 mmHg, and deoxygenated blood 45 mmHg, and blood oxygenated blood 40 mmHg, and tissue 45 mmHg. So here question they will ask you, so what is the content of the what is the partial pressure of atmospheric air? They will ask you, or they will compare the partial pressure of oxygen in deoxygenated blood and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in oxygenated blood. Both are same or not, they will ask you. Both are same. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide in tissue is greater than partial pressure of oxygen, right? So they will ask you statement based question. So this is very, very important. Okay, next, transport of gases. So blood is a medium for the transportation of gases. So transportation of oxygen, transportation of carbon dioxide. So 97% of carbon dioxide transmitted through the RBC, and only 3% of carbon dioxide, 97% of oxygen transmitted by RBC, only 3% of oxygen transmitted through the plasma in dissolved condition, only 3%, because the dissolving capacity of oxygen is very less compared to the carbon dioxide. So dissolving capacity of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times greater than oxygen. Okay, so that's why the dissolving capacity of carbon dioxide is 7. So plasma, in plasma, carbon dioxide is 7%. Okay, so 20 to 25% of the carbon dioxide transmitted in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Carbaminohemoglobin, RBC. 70% of the carbon dioxide transmitted in the form of bicarbonates, okay, through the RBC and plasma. 70% bicarbonate ions. 70% of the carbon dioxide transmitted in the form of bicarbonate ions. Very, very important. Right? So this is transport of oxygen. Binding of oxygen primarily related to the partial pressure of oxygen. When oxygen binding with hemoglobin of RBC, that is related with partial pressure of oxygen. When partial pressure of oxygen is more, hemoglobin combined with oxygen. If the partial pressure of oxygen is less, it will not be combined. Right? So the other factors that affecting oxygen binding with hemoglobin are partial pressure of carbon dioxide, pH, that is H plus ion concentration, and temperature. So these are the factors that affecting on binding of oxygen with hemoglobin. Now you can see at alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 mmHg, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 mmHg. H plus ion concentration is less. When H plus ion concentration is less, pH is more, temperature is low. These are the conditions which favorable for forming oxyhemoglobin. This is oxyhemoglobin. So at alveoli, oxygen is loaded with hemoglobin because of these factors. Very important. At tissue, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is more, 45 mmHg, Partial pressure of oxygen is only 40 mmHg. Because of the catabolic activity, H plus ion concentration is more. When H plus ion concentration is more, pH is low and temperature is more because of the catabolic activity. Under these conditions, hemoglobin, right, oxyhemoglobin dissociate into hemoglobin and oxygen, right? So now that means these are the factors that favorable for the diffusion of oxygen at tissue, and the same factor favorable at alveoli for formation of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so very important. 100 ml of blood carries 5 ml of oxygen to the tissue, and 100 ml of blood carries 4 ml of carbon dioxide from the tissue. Right? So carbon dioxide. So 20 to 25% of the carbon dioxide transmitted in the form of carbaminohemoglobin by hemoglobin present in RBC. Okay, the binding of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin is related to the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, but partial pressure of oxygen is a major factor that could affect this binding. Very important. Binding of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin majorly affected by the partial pressure of oxygen and also carbon dioxide, but major factor is oxygen. Now you can see hemoglobin, there is an amino group. So carbon dioxide combines with amino group and forming carbaminohemoglobin, right? At tissue where carbon dioxide partial pressure is more, 45 mmHg, oxygen partial pressure is less, only 40 mmHg. So carbaminohemoglobin combining with carbon dioxide, right? But where alveoli, partial pressure of oxygen is more, 104 mmHg. Partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less, 40 mmHg, right? So under this condition, carbon dioxide dissociate into hemoglobin and carbon dioxide. Carboxyhemoglobin dissociate into carbon dioxide and hemoglobin. Okay, so this is about transportation of carbon dioxide and bicarbonates. Now you can see in bicarbonate, because of catabolism, tissues are producing carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide combines with water and forming carbonate. This carbonate dissociate into bicarbonate and H plus ion in the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So carbonic anhydrase enzyme concentration is more in RBC compared to the plasma. Plasma also contain very minute amount of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. Fastest enzyme, biomolecule you studied, fastest enzyme that can convert 60,000 molecules within short period of time, right? Bicarbonate. Now you can see this bicarbonate ion. Bicarbonate dissociates into bicarbonate and H plus ion. And oxygen is coming like this with oxyhemoglobin. At tissue, I told you just H plus ion concentration is more. When H plus ion concentration is more, oxyhemoglobin dissociating into oxygen and hemoglobin. Now these hemoglobin combining with H plus ion and maintain the pH of the blood, right? So because of this reaction, concentration of bicarbonate ion will increase in RBC, right? To maintain ionic balance, bicarbonate is moving into the plasma and chloride ion moving from plasma to RBC to maintain ion balance. This is called chloride shift. Chloride shift. Chloride shift. Okay. So the effect of carbon dioxide, H plus ion concentration and binding of oxygen with hemoglobin. So that is when we are plotting, we will get S-shaped curve or sigmoid shape curve. Partial pressure of oxygen, okay, saturation of hemoglobin, here we will take saturation of hemoglobin with partial pressure of oxygen. We will get a sigmoid shape curve. But concentration of carbon dioxide, H plus ion concentration. At tissue, this sigmoid curve is moving towards right side, that is called Bohr effect. The effect of carbon dioxide, H plus ion concentration and binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is called Bohr effect. Okay, that moving towards right side. Halden effect, moving towards left side at alveoli, at tissue. Okay, we are not going into the deep. Uh, Only we are discussing or we are focusing NCRT. Okay, so regulation of respiration. So in humans have the significant ability to maintain or moderate the respiration according to the demand of the body cells or body tissue, right? So neural control of ventilation and chemical control of ventilation, right? So there are three centers are present. One, respiratory rhythm is center present in medulla oblongata. Chemosensitive area present near to the medulla oblongata. One pneumotaxic center present in pons varoli. These are the centers that can regulate respiration. Okay, now you can see. So medulla oblongata respiratory rhythm center having two parts: dorsal respiratory group, ventral respiratory group. These together we are calling respiratory rhythm center. When signal from the dorsal respiratory group, you can see signal from the dorsal respiratory group sending signal to the diaphragm, external intercostal muscle. So now diaphragm undergoing contraction, external intercostal muscles are undergoing contraction, that is inspiration taking place. Now, when signal from ventral group reaching to the diaphragm, external intercostal muscle, abdominal muscle, right? So then forcible inspiration, forcible expiration takes place. You can see dorsal respiration group control normal inspiration, ventral respiration group control forcible inspiration and expiration, right? Normal expiration is a passive process. Normal expiration is a passive process. Simple, you remember, normal respiratory rhythm in our body is maintained by the respiratory rhythm center, because it is sending signal to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Next, one more center, chemosensitive area. Chemosensitive area is a very sensitive to the chemicals like carbon dioxide, H plus ion concentration. Now, when increase in H plus ion concentration and carbon dioxide, increase in H plus ion concentration and carbon dioxide, the chemosensitive area that present near to the respiratory rhythm center is activated. That activated center sending signal to the respiratory rhythm center. So respiratory rhythm center sending signal to the intercostal muscle, diaphragm for the necessary adjustment. One reason. And we studied that aortic arches. These are aortic arches, aortic carotid arches. These are aortic and carotid arches. Inside the aortic arches and carotid arches, some receptors are present. These receptors are also sensitive to the carbon dioxide and H plus ion. When blood with high concentration of carbon dioxide, high concentration of H plus ion when flowing through these carotid arches and aortic arches, that high concentration of carbon dioxide and H plus ion is stimulating these carotid bodies and aortic bodies. They are sending signal to the chemosensitive area. Chemosensitive area sending signal to again to the respiratory rhythm center. Okay, so respiratory rhythm is maintain normal rhythm. Next one. When signal from pneumotaxic center reaching respiratory rhythm center, duration of inspiration decreases, rate of breathing increases. Very, very important. I told you. Duration of inspiration decreases. Earlier I told you 2 seconds are required for normal inspiration. Then the time will be decreasing, rate of breathing is increasing. When signal from the pneumotaxic center, this is pneumotaxic center and this is respiratory rhythm center. When signal from this center reaching to this, right? So duration of the breathing decreasing, rate of breathing increasing. Okay. So these are the disorders: asthma and emphysema, occupational disorders related to the respiration. In asthma, you know, bronchi and bronchiole, the diameter of the bronchi and bronchiole inflammation of the bronchi and bronchiole. Because of that, difficulty in breathing and wheezing sound will produce. Difficulty in breathing and wheezing sound will produce. Okay. Emphysema, chronic damage of alveolar valves. Due to cigarette smoking, there is a damage in alveolar valve that can decrease the surface area for exchange of the gases. Right? So occupational disorder, the person, those who are working in stone breaking industry or asbestos industry, they will be exposed into the dust that lead to some problem. So that can help in proliferation of the fibrous tissue in the lungs. Okay. So these are the diseases, very, very important. So question here, all of the following are incorrect with respect to the diaphragm related to the mechanism of breathing, except, right? So this is the diagram that is given in NCERT. Here you can see diaphragm is moving up. Diaphragm moving up means again it is coming to the dome shape, that is expiration, right? So volume of thoracic cavity increase, that is only in inspiration. Volume, ribs and sternum is raised, no, ribs and sternum coming back to the original position, right? That is also inspiration. Diaphragm is contracted, no, diaphragm contraction only inspiration. So diaphragm relaxed, yes, arched upward and representing expiration, right? This is the right. Right? All of the following are incorrect with respect to the following diaphragm related mechanism of breathing, except this is only except, that is the right answer. Right? So partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveoli and atmospheric air and tissue will be the partial pressure of alveoli, partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveoli, that is 40 mmHg. Atmospheric air 0.3 and tissue 45 mm. So remaining are not matching, so this is right, but this is wrong. Okay, so option 2 is the right answer. Which is correct? Functional residual capacity. Functional residual capacity is more than inspiratory capacity, right? No. Functional residual capacity 1100 to 1200 ml, but here inspiratory capacity 2500 to 3000. Functional less than inspiratory capacity. Inspiratory volume more than inspiratory capacity. This is inspiratory volume is, right? Inspiratory volume, inspiratory capacity already I told you 2500 to 2300. You can add 5 and inspiratory capacity, tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume, right? Here inspiratory reserve volume is less than that, so this is also wrong. Vital capacity is more than functional residual capacity, okay, this is more. Functional residual capacity just I told you this is, but vital capacity, tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume plus inspiratory reserve volume, all these together we are calling vital capacity, that is right. Inspiratory reserve volume is more inspiratory capacity, inspiratory reserve volume, inspiratory capacity, this is also wrong, both are same. So this is the right answer. So partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide at alveoli are, at alveoli they are asking 104, right? This is right. These remaining all are wrong. Alveoli they are asking at alveoli. Oxygen and carbon dioxide. First should be oxygen, then carbon dioxide. Right? So this is in systemic arteries. Right? So this is in tissue. This is in tissue. This is in atmosphere. So this is the right answer. Okay. So I hope you understood the concept. For quick revision, go through the NCERT line to line and you can follow this video. It may be helpful. It will be helpful for you to crack the NEET exam. So any question from breathing and exchange of gases based on this video you can do very easily. Thank you. Good night everyone. Thank you very much. Right.